Thank you very much. We're going to move on now to a panel on ensuring election integrity. It's going to be moderated by our friend Rebecca Euler, who worked on the voter ID law for Governor Tom Corbett, as I recall the story. She's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Motor Truck Association, a statewide organization founded in 1928. I don't remember that. To preserve, strengthen, and promote the interest of the trucking industry in Pennsylvania. Chris Wright will be joining us. He is a grassroots liberty activist who's in the leadership of the Potomac Tea Party, a national Tea Party with members in several states, including Pennsylvania. He started the Obamacare Truth Squad, which has been reporting all the bad news about Obamacare, Medicaid expansion, and Medicare for All since 2012. Seth Grove, what can I say? He is a state representative from Pennsylvania, from York. And he's doing a terrific job there, and he will be on the panel for us. And then last, but certainly not least, is our own Scott Davis, who is an elected judge of elections and is running for constable in Lower Paxton Township, Dauphin County. So behave out there, you know, I mean, he's watching. He began working on campaigns and later joined with the Young Republicans of Pennsylvania. He's proudly served as a judge of elections. Let me just add, as an honest judge of elections. He will not be indicted like the guys in Philadelphia. And prior to that, he was the elected majority inspector since 2013 on a single write-in vote. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, here is Rebecca and the panel.
Okay, good morning, everyone. You hearing me all right? It's great to see such a big crowd here today, and I'm so happy to hear that elections has come up several times during the PLC, a testament to what an important issue we have here. But I have to say, when I found out the topic of the panel I was asked to lead today, I found it a bit challenging to limit the topic, the discussion about elections to half an hour. As you can imagine, we have a lot to discuss. And like I said, in fact, it's come up several times in PLC, and we just listened to Jason Sneed, who gave a wonderful overview of some of the issues that we're dealing with. Yesterday, Senator Mastriano talked about it and told us that almost half of voters have questions about the integrity of last year's election, which to me is incredibly worrisome. Jesse Waters talked about it last night. For better or worse, he was clearly familiar with the specific details that caused problems in Pennsylvania. And of course, many of these problems were caused by the actions of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court last year, and Judge Kevin Brobson talked about that last night too. And I believe we do have an election integrity workshop this afternoon. So glad to hear, you know, it's been such a priority here at the PLC, so we're happy to have our panel here today. I actually did a quick Google search this morning because I was kind of curious, and despite what the mainstream media continues to tell us, we all know that this is a critically important issue. Just my quick Google search this morning, I sort of looked up, you know, what are people saying about questions about the 2020 election, people who are raising questions. And some of the words I found to describe, you know, some of these integrity questions that have been raised are not true, refuted, no evidence, misrepresentation, false claims, incorrect, and discredited. So in short, questioning the integrity of the election has been canceled. Apparently, we're not allowed to do that in mainstream media, but that's exactly why we need to discuss it in forums like this. And I know this is because most of us realize that the very basis of our representative form of government relies on people having faith in the integrity of our elections process. And when it's called into question, it threatens our confidence in our leaders and in our very institutions. So that's why it's such an important topic to discuss. In our panel today, we are fortunate to have perspectives from from all three levels actually, local, state, and national levels here, to give us some insight into issues of election integrity. With that, I want to jump right in with Representative Grove. Your committee You're a chairman of the House State Government Committee, which is the committee that is tasked with overseeing elections in Pennsylvania. Lucky you.
It's a labor of love.
Yes, right. Well, your committee did an incredibly thorough investigation of election laws in Pennsylvania this year. And I have it here, you actually had 31 and a half hours of hearings and 52 testifiers. Incredibly thorough. You just recently issued a 98-page report, which we joked before coming up here, he was going to read for the panel today, but we talked him out of it. So he's going to give us a little bit of a summary. He's also since called Pennsylvania's election laws god-awful, which I think is an incredible description. So Representative Grove, can you tell us more about what the committee found and why you believe Pennsylvania's election laws are god-awful?
Yeah, we found numerous issues within our election law. Number one, our election law is rooted in 1937. That's when the Election Code of Pennsylvania was passed. And if you're curious, my former colleague, Representative Will Tallman, was the prime sponsor of that legislation in 1937. I don't think Frank Ryan's here. I normally joke with him about age, so sorry, Will. You get it. We found a lot of discerning facts. Number one, it starts with the voter registration system. Voter registration is the key to access the entire election system. We have on record sworn testimony from elections director that they do not need to validate voter registration applications. Think about that. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, your first security check is optional. That scared a lot of members when we heard that. So that is a priority in House Bill 1300, which I just introduced this past week, fixing that entire voter registration system. We have this thing called Web API that was developed before we had online voter registration that allowed third-party entities to register voters and send that data up. They keep the name, they keep the address, they keep the Social Security, last four of the Social Security, they keep the driver's license address, they keep the signature. In perpetuity, they have that on every voter. Normally they use it for voter outreach, but with mail-in ballots, it's the same information you can apply for a mail-in ballot. We asked the Department of State if they have any internal controls to prevent a third-party entity like Rock the Vote, Tom Wolf for Governor, or any other liberal group or organization out there that is a third-party vendor in this, to stop them from using voter registration data to apply for a mail-in ballot without the consent of the voter. Their silence was deafening. Those are salient internal controls that are happening right now in our election system, and those are the internal controls we need to fix, because we need to make sure we have an accessible election system where every legal voter has the opportunity to exercise their God-given rights. But at the same time, and this is the part my friends across the aisle miss, it has to be secure so you have trust in that election and you keep bad actors out of the system. So those are two major points we found. We found a lot of other issues, but I think those are the two most salient ones, because that voter registration is the key to all of it. The entire system operates on that first step of voter registration.
Right. Well, let's turn things over to Scott. You've been on the front lines in a polling place in Pennsylvania, Lower Paxton Township, I believe, right? Right across the river in Dauphin County. What are your takeaways from the 2020 election, and how would you say changes in election administration how has it changed over the past couple of years, would you say, from your perspective?
Yeah, from my perspective, being there, working the polls, in 2020, we got new voting machines. That was done through that process that was really slammed down the different counties. But, when I look at it, it was the miscommunication, the misdirection, the lack of good communication coming from the state level. It seemed like every day leading into the election, something changed. And different counties, even different polling places, administered things differently. The one best example is I didn't even realize in Act 77 that polling places are no longer required to post the ballots from that election on the door at the end of the night. The poll watchers were asking me if I knew. I'm like, I'm posting them. I have nothing to hide, because they were being told that other ones were saying they're not posting them anymore because it says they don't need to. And it doesn't make sense because even with the information of who voted at my precinct, that's important. But why it was in there is because half the votes are no longer counted in the precinct. When you're taking all these ballots, my neighbors, putting those ballots into one big room, that's, I think, the biggest change. And I think it's the biggest change that needs reverted because the precinct, the judges lost that hand, lost that touch. Because now those ballots are going to some warehouse, they're sitting there, and people that don't know any of those people are processing those. The amount of people every year that come in, and we write deceased on a number of lines in the poll books because people passed away. And year after year, sometimes 2-3 years, we're still writing it for those same people. So it does take time for the poll books to get updated, but to go back to the root of the question, I think the biggest changes was just the lack of good communication, and it was at the state level. Dauphin County, I have to give credit, Dauphin County, an amazing job. I think we have one of the best voting directors in the state. Jerry Fieser deserves all the credit, and absolutely he does a phenomenal job. But it's just county by county, there's a lot of discrepancies, there's a lot of miscommunication.
Well, Chris, you have the unique experience of tracking election reform efforts more broadly across the country. What can you tell us about some of the best practices in election administration around the country?
Thank you, Rebecca. Ladies and gentlemen, if we don't fix this issue, there are no other issues. I'm giving you the perspective of a full-time activist with 12 plus years of experience, general experience, and I'm going to give you 3 best practices in 3 minutes. If you're going to work this issue, first, join a state election integrity network. If there isn't one in your state, create one. I started one in Virginia. At my suggestion, one was started in Michigan. They are now up to 95 groups and 500 volunteers to work this issue. Among the things a state network can do is avoid duplication of effort, identify best practices and best trainings around the state, call all hands on deck. For example, what's going on in Michigan at the moment, they have a movement underway to collect citizen affidavits to ask for audits of election results, and there are now thousands of citizen affidavits being collected in the state of Michigan, and the Michigan Election Integrity Network is facilitating that. Pennsylvania has a statewide election integrity group. It's called the PA Voters United. They have a table in the back of the exhibit hall, and I encourage you to visit there today to see how you can help. They have 20,000 members already, and they are on the web at pavotersunited.com. Second, join a national call. I'm aware of 3 national calls. One is run by Tea Party Patriots, another is run by the Defend organization out of Florida, and the third is Phil Klein's Amistad Project. I'm on the third call, the Amistad call, every Tuesday morning. It's excellent, very well run. Pennsylvania people are on that call, including Dr. Bob from Bucks County, and there are about 20 states represented each Tuesday morning. And this is where I learned how people are obtaining voter data, lots of ideas for state legislation in my state, and the whole story of the Maricopa County election audit, as told by an Arizona legislator who was on the call. He was involved in the whole effort. My third recommendation is to learn how to deconstruct the left's phony voter suppression narrative. They've been getting away with saying the same stupid stuff for at least 10 years, and it's time to push back. I have handouts on election integrity, including how to tear apart the voter suppression narrative. They're on the Potomac Tea Party table exhibit in the back of the exhibit hall, or you can write me at mail@potomacteaparty.com. Rebecca, back to you.
Great. Thank you. Well, I want to have a little bit of a discussion here for a few minutes, and we're going to focus on a couple of key points. First of all, from a personal perspective, having worked in elections at the Pennsylvania Department of State for a long time, it was always challenging navigating the balance between the county's responsibility for elections in Pennsylvania and for the state to ensure uniformity, because uniformity is critical to our elections. So I wanted to give that a little bit of thought because it clearly was an issue last year, and actually last year seemed to be sort of a perfect storm on this issue for many reasons, as most of you are aware. Scott, how did this play out at the local level? What did you see in the polling place?
This last election, I think things went really smooth for the primary. You had some issues throughout the different areas, but this primary I think went really smooth. Going back into 2020, I think that was the challenging one. And there were a lot of people. And again, I'm in Lower Paxton 20 has 1,100 registered voters. So for the most part, I run past these neighbors' houses on a regular basis. I know most of my neighbors. I've lived in the neighborhood pretty much my entire life. So I know most of my neighbors. But there were so many people I didn't know, I never saw, and it wasn't even that they were first-time voters. And I've never seen them at a polling place, or I've never seen them come vote before. And that kind of was a little suspicious, but we moved on and we followed the rules that are set aside of if it says check ID for first-time voters, we check the ID. You're always going to have that one person that insists on showing the ID because he believes he should be, and he does. But overall, the process has changed, the process has evolved, and the people know what to expect when they come and they go through that process. So there's a lot of different things that I'd love to see get changed, move forward, but continue on to the next point, and we'll finalize with that.
Well, Representative Grove, was there anything specific to sort of uniformity that your committee found that you could talk about? Differences between how counties administered things, for example?
So whenever we discuss policy, at least in the House Republican caucus, we always talk about that doctrine called the Pennsylvania Constitution. That is the preeminent law of the land which restricts government's ability to inflict damage on your lives on a day-to-day basis. That law has a section in it for uniformity of elections and voter registration. Uniformity of elections and registration. It doesn't say counties you can do whatever you want whenever you want. It has to be a uniform policy so every voter, whoever walks in, whatever polling place in Pennsylvania, has the exact same treatment and has the exact same ability to vote. What we saw in the past few election cycles and was driven by the Department of State guidance is non-uniformity of elections in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. 67 counties are running 67 elections. That is unconstitutional. That is not allowed. Now, we heard a lot of testimony from counties. Now, county governments, local governments, usually don't come to Harrisburg and say, give us more laws, more regulations, more rules. It never happens. Actually, I can't think of a time that it did happen, except with elections. We had election officials begging us to create uniformity. We had elections directors, when asked about why was Montgomery County and the blue-collar counties curing ballots and doing pre-canvassing ahead of the 7 a.m. deadline. One director said, it's illegal, I didn't do it because it's against the law. I love that director. They're doing their job. They're executing the elections based on the law. This last election cycle, we had to basically threaten Philadelphia election commissioners with impeachment because they violated the law. They violated a court ruling from the Supreme Court. They violated our statute. And even the Department of State, I'm sure they hated doing it, but we backed Governor Wolf into a corner, and they came out and said, yeah, you're actually violating the law. They backtracked and did not count illegal ballots in Philadelphia because we said, we're done litigating. I'm done. No more litigation. You break the law. If we have to enforce it using impeachment power, we're going to go do that. We will hold you accountable for illegal actions. No more court cases out of the House Republican caucus. We're done. So that's a big part of our election law moving forward. Accessibility, security, and integrity, which my colleagues across the aisle tend to forget is an important part about the election system, right? And making sure we have accountability in that system at the end of the day. So there's a lot of work we can do, and there's a lot of great policies we put into place in House Bill 1300 to make sure we actually abide by the Constitution and have uniform elections and standards here in the Commonwealth.
Great. Well, I think we need to talk about voter ID. I don't know about you all, but I believe that it's critically important. Pennsylvania passed a voter ID law almost a decade ago, but it was overturned by a state court. You see a theme there, maybe. And Governor Wolf actually has said just recently that voter ID would be a poison pill in any election reform bill and that he would veto it because it suppresses the vote. Chris, you talked a little bit about the voter suppression narrative that the left likes to push. Do voter ID requirements suppress the vote?
Not according to a 2019 study by the National Bureau of Economic Research. Based on 10 years of actual turnout data from voter ID states, the study concluded that voter ID laws have, quote, no negative effect on registration or turnout overall or for any specific group defined by race, gender, age, or party affiliation, close quote. In other words, the study concluded there is no statistically observable change in voting behavior that can be attributed to voter ID laws. Voter turnout went up, not down, in Georgia, North Carolina, and a Texas county after voter ID was instituted. Voter ID laws enjoy 75% support in the polls, with high support among blacks and other minorities. And voter ID laws have been upheld by just about every court that's looked at them. So no, voter ID laws do not suppress the vote.
Well, Representative Grove, does the House have a plan for voter ID going forward?
Yep, it is in our Voting Rights Protection Act, which was unveiled on Thursday. It's House Bill 1300. The first section of the bill is having legislative standing for any court case. The section is enhanced voter ID requirements for every person voting in person in the Commonwealth. That is in that because we think it's important. Our law is rooted, and if you think about elections, have always been rooted in this agrarian society in 1937 where everybody knew who they were, right? That's not society today. When I go walk around my neighborhoods during elections, I have my street list. I don't know all my neighbors. Poll workers, judge of elections, they don't know their neighbors to say, oh, you know, the Smith family just moved out, so John and Martha Smith, they're not going to vote this time around. But the Schmitz, they just moved in, they just registered to vote, we know them, they're going to come in. That doesn't happen in today's society. You don't know your neighbors all the time, and that's okay. But you need to modernize your system to ensure that those individuals aren't illegally voting by using your name. It's really an identity fraud issue, and we want to close that. Even the President Carter, Jimmy Baker report discussed this, and they came back on the side of you need to have voter ID to make sure you have trust in election system and prevent individuals from exploiting that system. It is an internal control issue that desperately needs closed in this state. And listen, we had a 7-year pilot program. Every first-time voter, whether you're newly registered or voting at your polling place in the same time, is required to show ID in the Commonwealth. How many court cases have we had in those 7 years that have said it has disenfranchised or suppressed votes? I can't think of a single one. It has worked, it is effective, and we do not have any court cases or any issues with voter ID current policy in Pennsylvania. There is no reason to extend that out and give the voters and the general public the confidence in every single election we have moving forward.
Well, it's like Scott mentioned. I've seen folks in the polling place who insist on pulling out their ID and showing it to you. A lot of people feel very strongly about that issue. So House Bill 1300, contact your state House member and ask them to support Representative Grove's bill. Some final thoughts here. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to give us some final thoughts on the elections process and where you think things will be going from here in the area of elections integrity and elections reform. Scott, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think the integrity of the vote is one of the most important foundational principles of what makes the United States the great nation that it really should be and is. And I think one of the first things that needs addressed is the penalty for anyone that votes illegally or tampers with an election as an election official, going the whole way up to the county level that's, manipulating or improperly staffing the ballots. The penalties have to be there. A slap on the wrist and saying, oh, you can come back next election because we need volunteers desperately isn't the way to do it. I mean, it almost pushes the line of treason, to some point, but it really should be classified at least at a felony level because it is the root of what makes America great. So if you look at the overall integrity of it, increasing those penalties, The other big piece that I truly believe, and I'm sure there's judges of elections out there that would disagree, but the ballots need to come back to the precincts. They need to come back. We need a way to really vet those at the precinct level. No more collecting them up until the day of or the day after the election because, a riot took place and I'm going to extend it for this county because they had, riots going on. Bringing those back in. Ballots have to be collected multiple days, in advance of when it is. If you're mailing it in, it's not that hard to do. Getting them back into the hands of the judge. That way when someone comes in to vote and say, hey, I mailed it in, but I want to, surrender that one and vote here, it's, hey, here you go. That's how the process was for years, and it worked. Now, I understand there's more ballots that are being mailed in today, but still, the judges can handle it. The machines work. The machines are secure, at least the ones in Dauphin County. And the last thing, and then I want to obviously give time to my colleagues here, but uniformity is also key. It has to be the same across the line.
Okay. Chris, would you like to tell us for parting thoughts?
Thank you. There are lots of short lists of suggested electoral reforms, including one from the Heritage Foundation. They're all pretty similar to the 2005 Carter-Baker Commission bipartisan commission recommendations for voter ID, curbing mail-in balloting, cleaning up the voter rolls, and not impeding the work of election observers. Some ideas not getting so much attention are whistleblower protections for registrars and clerks who step forward to report problems, closer supervision of elections by a joint committee of the state legislature. That's an Amistad Phil Klein favorite recommendation. And my personal favorite is numbered ballots. There were plans for a bill for this in South Dakota. Think of it, every single ballot accounted for and no more middle of the night ballot dumps. How refreshing.
Representative Grove.
Those ballot dumps, I've never heard ballot dumps. Oh, yeah, we found a stack of ballots. Did they ever go to Republicans? Anyway, listen, House Bill 1300. We're moving out of committee Tuesday. We're going fast. We're going hard. It's a great bill. Let me give you the cliff notes. Enhanced voter ID. Signature verification and two unique identifiers. Watermarks on the ballots. Public access to ballots post-election so every single one of you knows what the ballots are and can count them yourselves in every 67 counties of this Commonwealth. Mandated review of election issues by an independent attorney general. Observers can actually view the print of the ballot. You don't have to be across the room with binoculars to see what's happening. Verified list of actually who's eligible to vote pre-election and who actually voted in the election post-election. Vote list cleanup mandates. Can we at least not have dead people on our voter rolls, right? We're the first state, and I know Representative Russ Diamond is running around here. This is his idea. The first state to propose open source codes on all the voting machines. So the source codes will be open. The first state to propose a fully independent, extensive audit system for the election machines pre-election and the entire election process post-election. And for the love of God, no more Department of State guidance. They manipulated the system. They are done. We're moving on. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Suffice to say, stay tuned. Contact your state representative about House Bill 1300, and we'll watch, hopefully things will move quickly here, as Representative Grove said, and we will see some improvements and some integrity reinfused into our election process. Thank you.